Hi everybody, Connor here, H&J Fence Supply, and today we're going to be talking about vinyl fencing. Now I know it's a big surprise, H&J Fence wants to talk about vinyl fence, but the reason why we're talking about it is so that you can have all the information that you need when you need to make that decision on which vinyl fencing you're going to get. So we're going to talk about its structural integrity, its durability. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things about this, as well as how nice it looks. But we're going to do that one at a time because I have next to me a whole bunch of options. We're talking the stuff that we carry here at H&J Fence, the Endura Pro Max line. We've got options from local suppliers that we know in the local Philly tri-state area. You know what we're getting when you go through a supplier. And we also have stuff from Home Depot and Lowe's. We're talking the big box toolbox stores that if you walked in there and just said, hey, I want some fence, what would you be getting? So all this information is so that you, if you're a contractor, you can inform your homeowners about what you're going to be giving them, and you can keep them up to date and fully informed on the details. Or if you are a homeowner yourself, you know what to ask your contractor to get if you see something here that you like specifically. All right, I think that's enough talking for now. Let's get started with one of these. So what makes a good picket? Now, pickets are these singular slats that go into your fence. Obviously, one of the first things you want is something that looks nice. You don't want any of the internal structure showing through too much. You want a good surface to it. Maybe you want something with a little more shine, a little more, or maybe you want something a little more matte. That depends on what you're looking for. But that's just the surface of it, literally just the surface of it. We're also going to be looking inside, and this is where the structural things are important. So we got internal ribs, runners that go the entire length of the picket, the arrangement of these, how many how thick each one is, that all is super important, as well as the external thickness of the outer shell. All of this comes into play in its structural stability. We also want to make sure that the length of the pickets are what they say they are. Now if you know lumber has a specific size before they treat it, and then they treat it and then it shrinks. Well, sometimes fencing, they cut it a little bit shorter because the final construction height is going to be about 8 feet, depending on how far you put it in, how far you put your posts into the ground, where it sits, different elevations, stuff like that. But it should be 8 feet from the ground level to the top of the fence. So they don't make the pickets the full length sometimes. So you're expecting 72, you get 70 maybe. We're not 100% sure. I know that there are different lengths over here. We're going to measure out each one to make sure you're getting as much material as you can, and you're not getting shortchanged on height simply because you went to a different supplier. All right, so I mentioned before cutting corners. Where do they cut corners? Well, let's talk about that. So I mentioned already that sometimes you might lose an inch or two because the sold to you length doesn't equal the length that you're getting in hand. Why is that? Well, when you add the runners on top, the runners on the bottom, the top rail, bottom rail, those add inches to your final construction as well. So you're actually paying for less because they're shaving inches off. That reduces weight. Weight's also very important because if you're shipping these in big mass quantities, less weight is better because it's easier to ship. Less fuel, all that kind of stuff. Takes up less space. A bunch of things to take into consideration. So how do you reduce weight other than literally chopping off the ends? Let me show you. On the inside, these supports, these runners that go from the top of the picket to the bottom of the picket, this gives it its internal support. Sometimes they make them with less, sometimes they make them with thinner material. The same thing goes to the outer shell. Sometimes the outer shell is 1/16 of an inch rather than 1/8. It makes the difference. So you're paying for what you expect to be a sturdy, bigger thing. You might be getting something that's a little bit flimsier than you thought. You might be getting something that isn't supported as well. You might be getting something that's a little bit shorter. We're here to look at all these different brands and make sure we know what each one provides and offers for you as a fence installer or owner. First up, we got brand X. Now we picked up brand X from a local supplier in the area, in the Philly tri-state region. And this is commonly used by a lot of contractors out there. So let's take a look at it, see what it offers, and go over the positives and negatives of it. So first up, we've already tested a bunch of these pickets in what we call the baseball destructovision test. You can check out the channel. There's a long video there of us just unloading into these pickets with as fast as we can throw baseballs. We had a pitching machine going, and we also had what I like to call the H&J warehouse bullpen stepping up and throwing as hard as they can. So I have some information on the impact durability of quite a few of these pickets. We have some that we're going to be working on next soon, so keep an eye out on the channel for when those get put up for Destructo Vision Baseball Part 2. But right in hand, we have Brand X. This is one of the ones that we got tested. So let's first take a look at the structure. Brand X uses 3 internal structure ribs. Okay, these runners run the entire length. Now, the downside about this is that all of these are rounded. And I think it's because of heat during temperature differentials, during shipping, what have you. These inner structure points are starting to buckle. They're starting to bend. They're still solid. I can't really bend them by hand. I could get a tool in there maybe. But the entire run of this picket has a bent internal rib. Now the outside of it, it's a decent size. Let's take a quick measure of this. So we ordered the same size for all of our stuff. So this is a 61-inch picket. So that's getting to just over 5 feet there. Just over 5 feet, a couple inches over 5 feet. The rib area, do this on camera like I've done this before. So we're looking at, that's about a 1/16 of an inch in width. It's not that thick. This is about like, I need a better measuring tape than what we have here. So they're using 1/16 width plastic, vinyl for this. It didn't do great in the baseball test. It didn't do the worst, but it didn't do great in the baseball test. When we were firing at this at the different distances, 45 miles an hour from 20 feet, it got scuffs and dents. 45 miles an hour from 10 feet, it got much deeper dents. Once we started throwing in 20 feet, 65 miles an hour, maybe 70 if, you know, we're talking about the ex-ball players that were out there at the time, we started putting holes in it easy. The internal structure, because it's so bent on the inside, what that leads to is you can see the 3 ribs. I mentioned hot dogs before. 3 ribs on the panel. These 3 ribs on the panel, you can see on the inside because of the way it was packed. So Brand X, we're not hot on. It didn't do that great in the test for durability. The material's a little flimsy comparatively to what you would want. So that's Brand X. Let's jump on to our next one, which is going to be Brand Y. All right, let's go on to Brand Y. We got Brand Y here. Brand Y is another competitor in the region. We ordered the same length across the board. So let's get a quick measure of that. Make sure it's on camera when I do that. I'm a professional. That's the idea. So this is 61 inches, a little over 5 feet again. So last one was 62. This one's 61. So Brand Y actually cuts an inch off the end of what you're ordering. But let's take a look at the internals, right? I'll measure the internals after. Let's take a look at the internals first. So as you can see, Brand Y is definitely a more bargain brand when it comes to internal structure. There's only 2 lines, and you can see them clearly on the outside. You can see them clearly right here. So if you don't want extra lines on your vinyl pickets, not the one to go for. And there's only 2. That's a severe structural weakness compared to other brands. So for example, this also went through the baseball test. This is the one that came out on the bottom of the 3 that we tried on the first day. The Brand Y was found wanting. It didn't even survive the pitching machine. 45 miles an hour, 10 feet away, buried a ball into one of the pickets dead center. It was spectacular. So we were kind of let down by Brand Y in that regard. It just didn't have the same sturdy, reliable durability that you would want out of a privacy fence, because stuff's gonna run into it. It's a wall, essentially, vinyl in your backyard. It needs to be able to withstand some knocks, and this one performed the worst. All right, now on to our next brand. We got Brand R here. Brand R is from another local competitor that we have here in the Philly tri-state region. It is one of the ones that we have not tested yet. So we've done the baseball video for brand XY and the Endura Pro Max. We have not done it for this one yet, but judging by the structural setup of it, the surface of it, what we got on the inside, the way it feels, I'm fairly sure I can guess what this is gonna do. So first up, let's get a quick measure. Now, we ordered 5-foot pickets for everything, and we ended up with, okay, 60.5 inches is what we got here. So 5-foot picket, we got 62 for brand X, 61 for brand Y, and now we are on half an inch over that. There's no wiggle room in that regard. So when you put the top rail and the bottom rail on, you're not gonna have the same height as the other brands. So that's that for length of what you get when you order 5-foot picket. Let's go for the surface next. So surface has got a little bit of a semi-gloss action going on, but the thing that I noticed first, always notice first on this, it's got two lines right here where you can see the internal ribbing on the outside of the vinyl. That's something that doesn't have to happen, but it happens a lot when you use thinner material, which will take us to our next section. If you follow me over here to the close-up cam, hi close-up cam, how you doing? All right, so here we go. Inside this one, we have a similar situation to brand Y. We have two internal runners. This saves on weight, this saves on material for production, but it kind of leaves you holding the bag because now all of this in here, it's not as supported. So the one that failed first was brand Y. It had the same internal structure. So that might happen during the baseball video, our baseball destructive vision part 2. As far as material thickness for the exterior, it's 1/16 of an inch on the outside. It's a 1/16 of an inch on the outside. The internal runners are 1/16 of an inch as well. So at least the internal runners are as thick as the outside. That's a plus. The downside is that, I'll take it over to the close-up again. It's got the bent interior. So like I said before, this is what happens when you store it improperly, when you don't give it the right temperature, when you put too much pressure on it. Things like this can happen. And end of the day, it doesn't completely ruin the picket, but structurally, it doesn't have the same support because the internal structure is already bending. I would not go with this one if I were going to be picking, but again, mileage may vary, what your contractor is taking to you. If you're a homeowner, what your contractor is taking to you is up to you. And if you are a contractor, maybe your homeowner really wants this one because they like the lines or something like that. You never know. But that's brand R. We've been through all the local fence supply competition that we have around here. We've been through all of their brands to varying degrees of success and concern. Now it's time for us to get to the big box stores, the toolbox stores, your Home Depots, and in this case, in my hand right now, Lowe's. We are going to put it through the same expectations that we have, the same rigors that we put the others through, and we're going to see how they stack up to what you can get from a local supply store. Now, obviously, Lowe's and Home Depot have the advantage of there being one literally wherever you can find one. Availability is one of their perks. So let's give them that. Let's assume that availability and being able to get your hands on some of this vinyl fencing is part of what you need. So that's a bonus for them. So let's look at the surface, because that's one of the other things we like to look at first. This one I actually like aesthetically speaking. So as far as this one goes, it has the internal runners that you can see on the outside that the others kind of had. And I mean, if you like it as an aesthetic, that's great. Lowe's goes an extra step further. The way they've molded the surface, it actually provides more texture. So I don't know if you can properly see it. Maybe it's visible a little bit more in there. But all of these lines are also surrounded by other textures that run in the same direction. So it gives kind of like a wood grain-ish kind of effect. It's not as organic. It's definitely more straight lines, but it does provide a surface that isn't just flat white, straight line, rinse and repeat. So that's definitely a bonus for it. Again, 5-foot pickets, 60 inches is what we're going for. Let's measure this. Let's measure this and see what we got as far as length. So we're at 61.5. We have a little bit more wiggle room. So this will sit inside the rail a little bit deeper. So maybe the others end up being the right height when you got it all laid out and all set up with the top rail and the bottom rail. But the longer the internal picket that slides into that top rail, the more support you have for those rails and the fence as a whole. So having that extra space is very good. So that's a bonus on their side. They're not cut short at Lowe's for that. What else do we got? Internals. That's what's next. All right, let's go on over to the hyper close, the super close up. So we have 3 supports. The problem with these supports, and I hope you can see it with my finger like this, I push, this wiggles like big time. Like I can just shove it over to the side. It's pretty flimsy in there. These runners, these ribs are trouble. I don't think this is going to have much structure. We're going to put it through the baseball test. The actual thickness be the 1/16 of an inch thickness, but these are the worst runners I have seen. Like I can, uh-oh. I just pinched a little bit with my hand there, and the internals are bending. That's not good. That's really not good. Okay, so structure durability wise, Lowe's is definitely on the low end of things. This might even be broken faster than brand Y did, and brand Y failed at 45 miles an hour for 10 feet. This might be even worse. So, end of the day, it's got the good length, it's got the nice surface to it. The downside is definitely its structural integrity. I don't know if the durability of this picket is going to hold out on you. So I would suggest not using Lowe's unless you really like this surface. Or if you like this surface, point it out to your contractor and say, hey, I want something that kind of looks like this. They might be able to find something in the other brands that might be surfaced like this. Or if you're a contractor and your homeowner really wants this pattern, I would look somewhere else. I would not get Lowe's, even if they're like, I want the Lowe's one. This will break a hell of a lot faster. A straight tennis ball would probably put a hefty dent in this. So that's Lowe's. So we just took a look at Lowe's, right? Let's take a look at their biggest competition, Home Depot. Everybody knows a Home Depot near them. I'm fairly sure everybody understands it is the playground of the adult male. It's got a whole bunch of good things about it, but they also provide vinyl fencing. And we're going to take a look at it. So the first thing I already noticed about this, even when it was racked up on the other side, this is significantly shorter. Even with the top rails, I don't know if this is going to reach the actual height that they advertise, even adding on the extra pieces. You're either going to have a gap at the bottom or it's going to be too short. Regardless, let's take a look at the surface before we get into measuring it. So surface-wise, we suffer from the same problems as the others. They did not take the aesthetic route where they wanted to make sure there was some like texture to it so that it looks like it's got some intentional lines to it. This just looks like the interior ribs are sticking through. You can see them clear as day. They have a completely different shine to them. Like I said, if you like that extra vertical line like vibe and aesthetic for your fencing, okay, cool, that's the way that's gonna go. But as far as how that looks, I'm not a fan of it. It's got a clean semi-gloss. I mean, the surface is a nice, but yeah, you can see those lines within. Let's take a measure. So this was, again, we asked for 5 feet, 60 inches on all of them. And we got, 57.5. That's 2.5 inches shy of the asking distance. And if you attach the rails on it, I think we have another video on the channel that talks about this. But I think if you put them side by side, panel to panel, there's like a 4-inch difference. So you're not getting the size that you're asking for. I get it with lumber. You have the pre-treat and then the post-treat measurements. It's a 2x4 before they treat it, and then it becomes a 1 and 5/8 by 3 5/8, you know, whatever the shrinkage they get. It's never pure and it's very uneven. If you go to one, but there's no excuse for cutting these that much shorter. It's kind of crazy. So that's a letdown. That's them cut. That's a big example of cutting corners. Let's get to the material of it. As far as the feel, the ribs are holding against squeezing pressure. They seem to be rigid. They're not completely rigid. There's some give, because you do want a little bit of give. Too rigid makes something brittle. You want flexibility, but you want durability. So it looks like there's a good amount of flexibility without sacrificing too much in the durability front. There's only 3 ribs in the center, which seems to be the more safe bet when you're talking about people constructing durability. If they're not cutting corners, they're not trying to cut too many corners on the structural integrity. But it's, I don't know. These failed at this style. The 3 rib style fails at like 65, 70 miles an hour. So if you got a kid with a cannon for an arm, they're gonna put a hole in your fence. But interior, let's get a close up. Take a look at these. So you can see it's got the 1/16 of an inch exterior. They're rigid. Like I said, they're more rigid, textured on the inside too. It feels like it's a decent structure. If only they didn't cut it down so far, I'd actually say this might not be bad. This doesn't feel flimsy. This doesn't feel like I can bend it. I can't squeeze it and squish it. I feel like I can put weight on it. If they didn't cut it down so far and actually give you smaller than what you are asking for in terms of original length, I'd say this might not be a bad choice. We'll see how it does in the baseball test. We haven't tested this or Lowe's yet on baseball test. That's coming soon, like I said. But I don't know. 2.5 inches shy of what you say you're selling is a little rough for me. So that's Home Depot. We've been through every option from everyone else. The local suppliers in the region, in the Philly tri-state area. We've also gone to 2 big box toolbox stores, Home Depot and Lowe's. We had varying degrees of success and concern across the board. But now we're gonna go to what we have here at H&J. We carry what's called the Endura Pro Max. It is a impressive level of sturdy. Now you might be thinking, oh, you're saying that because you carry that at the store. No, we tested it. We put it against a brutal array of tests when it comes to at least the baseball first. We got more coming soon. We put it against 2 other brands so far. We did test ours in that process, and we could not put a hole in this. We did everything we could. The strongest arms on the team, the pitching machine going at full tilt, we couldn't put a hole in it. There were dents and there were marks. You can't throw a 70-mile-an-hour fastball at something and expect it to just not get a dent. Even the nicest, siding of a house, you'll get a mark. You'll probably chip a brick or something like that. It got scratches and marks, but it never broke. We had full-blown failures on the other pieces. This never broke. So let's go over what you get. So first, let's measure it out. So you asked for 60 inches, 5 feet, you get 61. You get an extra inch, and then you put the top rails on top. So you got that extra area. Next, surface. You can barely see the ribs. The internal supports of this fence, you can barely see them on the inside. That's no other brand has the same level of low profile that the Endura Pro Max does. It's barely noticeable. You have to really look for it. If you just look at it quick, you can kind of catch the other ones. I got the other pieces right off to my left. You can see in those all the lines from a good distance. I don't even have my glasses on it. I can see the lines on those things. On this one, I have to get close. I have to get real close to see the lines. And even then, there is kind of a surface to it that has extra lines through it. So it's not as drastic of an aesthetic adjustment as, let's say, the Lowe's did to cover up their sins with their runners. They're subtle. So it kind of just blends in with the whole surface. It's a fantastic option there. So let's move on to sturdiness. We're gonna get into why, durability-wise, this stands out. So when you look inside, come with me to the close-up camera here. So if you look inside, you can see that there are 4 different runners that run the entire length of it. You can also see that the exterior shell is twice as thick as the others. This is 1/8 of an inch. This is sturdy. This isn't going anywhere. The internal runners are 1/16 of an inch, the same as the outer shell of the others, and they don't wiggle or bend. Runs the whole length of it. We put this to the test hard. We threw those 70-mile-an-hour fastballs, and it was standing up to them. You got your dents and your scratches like you would expect, but no failures. Everything else we've tested so far, we got failures. And I'm looking forward to testing the other stuff because it's fun to break things sometimes. You know, every once in a while, you need a little bit of a vent. And hurling fastballs as fast as you possibly can into some vinyl fencing is oddly satisfying. So I'm looking forward to that. Keep an eye out on the channel for when that goes up. But yes, here's the pricing for the Enduro Pro Max. Now it's a little bit more expensive, but that's because you get more material. You get a sturdier material. You are one of those situations where you are really getting what you pay for. You put a little bit extra in and you get a great product out of the other side of it. This is going to last you way longer than those. So would you rather pay, $100 a panel every 10 years to replace all of the pickets that are broken over that time? Maybe even something bumped into it or smashed it. I don't know. Or would you rather pay like 110 or, the price is down here. A little bit more every 20 years maybe, because this holds up that long. It's twice as durable. It takes impacts like a champ, and it looks great. So that might sound like we're tooting our own horn here for the line that we carry, but this is after testing. This is after putting the scientific method down on the table and seeing what we can get. But that's it for all of the pickets. That's all I've got here. Yeah, time to wrap it up.